You just refreshed your banking app. The screen loads, and there it is. A 1 followed by 6 zeros. You did it. You are officially the first millionaire in your entire bloodline. You broke a generational cycle of scarcity. You won the war. So, why is it so incredibly quiet? Why is your heart rate dropping into a hollow, empty rhythm? Why does this massive, life-altering victory suddenly feel exactly like a funeral? You spent your entire life operating under a very specific, universally accepted delusion. You believed that crossing the threshold into the top 1% of earners would feel like an explosion of joy. You thought there would be a parade, a massive exhalation of breath, a permanent release of all the anxiety that has haunted your family for generations. You imagined that securing this level of capital would finally allow you to exhale, to drop the heavy iron armor you have been wearing since you were old enough to understand what a past due notice meant. But as you stare at that glowing screen in the dark, the reality of extreme upward mobility sets in. There is no parade. There is only a terrifying, crushing silence. This is the hidden psychological toll of becoming self-made that no business guru, financial advisor, or motivational speaker will ever warn you about. When you build an empire from absolute scratch, you are doing something inherently violent to your own history. You are ripping yourself out of the socio-economic soil that grew you. You have spent years grinding, optimizing, and sacrificing, completely blinded by the pursuit of the goal. You traded your 20s, your sleep, your relationships, and your peace of mind for the ultimate high score. But now that the war is won and the capital is permanently secured, you are forced to look around. You realize that in the process of building your wealth, you have accidentally built a fortress. And while a fortress is incredibly effective at keeping poverty out, it is equally effective at trapping you inside. You are entirely, profoundly alone. This is the psychological phenomenon known as wealth-induced survivor's guilt, compounded by class migration trauma. To understand the specific type of pain you are experiencing right now, you have to dissect how human communities are actually formed at the biological level. For your entire life, your identity was tied to the struggle. Your friends, your family, your hometown, your entire social architecture was built on mutual financial suffering. Poverty and middle-class friction act as the incredibly powerful social glue. You bonded with your peers over splitting incredibly cheap dinner bills. You built deep, lasting friendships, complaining about terrible bosses, stressing over microscopic rent increases, and figuring out how to stretch a paycheck until Friday. You were cortisol bonded. The stress hormone was the shared baseline of your existence. The struggle was not just a temporary condition you were all trying to escape. It was the shared language of your reality. It was the common enemy that made you a tribe. The moment you cross that seven-figure threshold, you haven't just gained capital, you have lost your relatable identity. You are suddenly stripped of your native language. You wake up one morning and realize you no longer have to check the price of gas. You don't have to calculate the total in the grocery cart before getting to the register. If your car breaks down, it is no longer a devastating financial crisis that derails your month. It is merely a minor, 10-minute logistical annoyance. And while this represents absolute financial freedom, biologically it triggers a deep evolutionary panic. Human beings are hardwired to fear standing outside the tribe. For hundreds of thousands of years, standing outside the tribe meant freezing to death. Your nervous system doesn't know you have $1 million in liquidity. It just knows you are suddenly different from everyone around you. You begin to look at your parents. You look at the people who worked physical, bone-crushing jobs for 40 years just to retire with a fraction of what you made this quarter. You see the calluses on their hands, the bad backs, the exhaustion etched into their faces, and then you look at your own clean hands that generate wealth by simply typing on a keyboard and moving digital assets. You look at your childhood friends who are still drowning in high-interest credit card debt, taking on second jobs just to keep their heads above water. The guilt is suffocating. You feel like you have stolen a lifeboat while the rest of the ship is going down. So you try to fix it. This is the first trap of the newly wealthy. You try to bridge the gap with capital. You pick up the tabs at dinner. You buy them expensive gifts. You pay for the vacations. You even try to hire them or invest in their terrible business ideas. But the guilt does not fade. In fact, injecting your new money into old relationships only accelerates the decay. You learn a very painful lesson about human nature. Generosity from a place of extreme asymmetry does not breed gratitude. It breeds quiet resentment. The drift doesn't happen with explosive arguments. Nobody screams at you for being successful. It happens in the silence. It's a slow, agonizing realization that you are being systematically phased out of your own life. It's the jokes your childhood friends stop making around you. It's the group chats that suddenly go dormant the second you send a message, only for you to realize weeks later that they started a new chat without you. It's the sudden invisible wall that drops down at Thanksgiving dinner when someone complains about the rising price of groceries, and you realize you haven't actually looked at a price tag in 2 years. You have nothing to contribute to the conversation without sounding completely out of touch. You try your hardest to camouflage your success. You intentionally park your new car around the corner before walking into the family barbecue. You start wearing unbranded basic clothing. You purposefully complain about minor inconveniences just to seem relatable. You lie about how much things cost, rounding down your successes and exaggerating your setbacks. But the camouflage never works. They can smell the lack of panic on you. They know that when the check arrives, your heart rate doesn't spike. They know that your survival is no longer in question. Your mere presence becomes a walking mirror, reflecting their unfulfilled potential and their daily anxieties back at them. This creates a brutal conversational divide. You learn very quickly that you cannot talk about your new problems, because to them, your problems sound like insults. You cannot talk about the stress of optimizing your offshore tax strategy, or the anxiety of managing a payroll of 50 employees, or the headache of dealing with capital gains limits. You cannot complain about the contractor messing up the marble in your second home. To a drowning man, complaining about the temperature of the water on your yacht is an unforgivable crime. So you choose silence. You sit at the table and nod along as they discuss issues you could solve with a single wire transfer from your phone. But you know that if you pay off their mortgage, you will permanently mutate the relationship. You will cease to be their brother, their son, or their friend, and you will forever become their bank. Every future interaction will be tainted by the unspoken weight of leverage, debt, and mandatory gratitude. The silence becomes a permanent resident in your life. You are physically sitting in the same room you grew up in, but psychologically, you are operating on an entirely different planetary orbit. But the isolation is only half of the psychological toll. The other half is the paranoia. This is the phase known as the scarcity hangover. When you inherit wealth, you inherit a safety net. You inherit a network of lawyers, trust fund managers, and a societal framework designed to protect your capital. But when you are the first in your bloodline to cross the millionaire threshold, you are operating on a high wire without a net. Your brain is still wired for poverty, but your bank account is wired for the elite. You begin to obsessively check your balances. You develop an irrational fear that a single mistake, a single lawsuit, or a single market crash will send you straight back to the neighborhood you fought so hard to escape. You realize that you don't actually know how to be rich. You only know how to stop being poor. These are two entirely different skill sets. You hoard cash. You struggle to delegate. You work even harder than you did when you were broke, because the fear of losing the empire is vastly more terrifying than the pain of building it. You are a millionaire on paper, but in your mind, you are just a highly paid fugitive, constantly looking over your shoulder, waiting for the universe to realize a mistake was made and take it all back. You hit the wall. The ultimate uncomfortable truth of extreme upward mobility is that you cannot take everyone with you. This is the great lie sold to us by modern hustle culture. The idea that you will grind your way to the top and bring your entire neighborhood, your entire family, and all your old friends with you to the summit is a cinematic fantasy. It is a mathematical impossibility. Building an empire requires you to systematically dismantle the world you used to live in. You cannot upgrade your software while refusing to change your hardware. You cannot operate at the highest echelons of financial leverage while dragging the emotional anchors of your past. You begin to understand the cold, mathematical reality of success. You must grieve the loss of your past self and the people attached to it. The first $1 million buys you freedom from poverty, but it bills you with profound isolation. It strips you of your comforting illusions and demands that you stand completely, uncompromisingly on your own. You look at the socio-economic landscape and realize you belong nowhere. You are no longer one of them, but you don't yet belong to the elite. The inherited wealth class will view you as new money, unrefined, chaotic, and overly obsessed with the mechanics of earning. They will view your hustle as slightly vulgar. Meanwhile, your old class will view you as an alien, a defector who abandoned the trenches, a sellout who forgot where they came from. You are a ghost trapped in the liminal space between tax brackets. But in this absolute isolation, there is also absolute freedom. By severing the generational chains of scarcity, you have purchased the ultimate blank canvas. You did what you were supposed to do. You took the hits. You absorbed the trauma. You broke the cycle so that your children and their children will never have to know what it feels like to panic at a grocery store checkout line. You traded your history for their future. The silence you are sitting in right now, staring at that glowing screen in the dark, is not a funeral. It is not the end of your life. It is an empty room, swept clean of the anxieties of your ancestors, waiting for you to decide what to build next. Welcome to the 1%.